So I feel like the last few years, at least for me, have made me a little bit more socially awkward, or more so than I used to be anyway. I got so used to being at home or having most of my face hidden behind a mask that I kind of forgot how to interact with people when I'm around them all the time, and worse yet, sometimes I forget to make my face not reflect what I'm thinking. It's not great when you work in retail. So sometimes I miss the mask. I'm like, what is my face doing right now? That is not good. Not that I enjoyed the isolation, but because it was kind of the norm to just be at home with the family constantly, I got used to it. And then when I wasn't doing that anymore, I found that it just seemed harder and like a lot more work to maintain friendships, cultivate new relationships, and interact with people around me. So this morning we're going to explore some of the main ways to foster friendships and relationships with those around us, and to just create that community that we all so want to be a part of. So let's pray real quick. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to be up here, and I just ask that my words would reflect your heart, and that people would recognize the things that are for them in this message, and that you would just speak to us individually this morning. Amen. So I think that the biggest problem that people run into when trying to have relationships in community is that we tend to forget that it's a two-way street. We get caught in waiting for others to come to us. I read a post on Facebook more towards the beginning of the pandemic a few years ago that essentially said, I now know who my real friends are because they're the ones who have reached out to me during all this crazy to see how I'm doing. In fact, a lot of the pastors that Stephen and I have heard from, when they've been talking about some of the struggles of reopening and coming back to church, said that when they reach out to people who have said, I am not coming back to church, one of the main reasons is because they didn't see their church friends reach out to them to see how they were doing during the shutdowns. Now, while it is accurate to say that true friends are the ones that reach out to us to check in on us when we're going through something, it's also a bit of a false expectation, especially when we're talking about a situation that is affecting everyone around us. So yes, friends are the ones that check in on you when you lose a loved one or when you get a hard diagnosis from the doctor. But I also recognize that I am not the center of my friend's world. These same people who have now disavowed church community and don't want to come back because they feel like they were ignored during a global crisis, when asked by these pastors, also admitted that they themselves had not reached out to connect with any of their friends and see how their friends were doing. So if I want community and friendships, it's also up to me to be an active participant in those relationships. As Stephen mentioned last week, if your expectation of friendship is to sit in a corner and see who is going to come to you and who is willing to put in all the work in connecting, you will feel alone and ignored and probably won't want to go to youth every week or come to church every week. I think when it comes to relationships, we often think in terms of give and take, talking about interacting with people and just that transactional attitude, but I think it's a poor way of looking at it. So this morning, I just want to look at some general main ways to give and receive in relationships, because at the end of the day, I think these are both areas that we struggle in. I think we can have a really hard time reaching out to others, and I think we can also have a hard time allowing others to genuinely reach out to us. So I think when we are looking at friendships and relationships, the best place to start isn't to ask ourselves, what kind of friend do I want? But instead to ask, what is a friend looking for in me? Luke 6:31 It's the other way. Tech, I tell you. Luke 6:31 says simply, do to others as you would have them do to you. When we start from a position of trying to be a real friend to others or to help create a real community for others, we actually encourage others to do the same thing. Hebrews 10:24-25, which I did put up there. No, I don't know. Sorry, guys. I'm going to get you to do it for me. I just can't handle it this morning. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So where do we start? The first thing is talk and listen. I don't know if you guys are feeling it the same way, but small talk seems really hard now. I internally feel like I have better things to do than talk about the weather. So while I want to talk to people, I want it to be meaningful conversation. I don't really feel like I have a lot of patience for all the airy-fairy formalities. So if I ask someone, how are you doing? And they seem like they're not wanting to push past, oh yeah, I'm fine, then I feel a strong desire to just move on to the next person and find someone that wants to actually connect. I think in some ways, based on what others I've talked to have also said, it seems to indicate a really strong desire for a meaningful connection. If the other person isn't into that, we don't want to waste our time. And this could be a good thing and it could be a bad thing, and I haven't fully decided. I think that it is a good thing that we want meaningful connection. I think it was really easy before to keep our relationships at a platonic level, never get past the formalities, and now we recognize that we need that deep connection and real relationship with other people. The feelings of being disconnected from others were so strong that we're pushing back and want the opposite of that now. However, there is a benefit to small talk. It allows us to ease into conversation and build trust and start a foundation for a friendship to develop. And it's also a gateway to sharing the tough stuff in our lives and existing friendships. No one goes straight into all the good and bad going on when they're talking to someone. It would be awkward and halted and kind of strange. So the key to forming relationships is in the tiers of conversation. We start with the surface talk, and it creates space for people to share. But the give and receive that we see in conversation is also very important and can be very hard. If I'm always talking about myself and the things going on in my life, people will quickly start avoiding me. But in the same vein, if I only listen to people, no matter how good a listener I am, and I'm never willing to share anything personal about the good and the bad stuff happening in my life, people will also start avoiding me for that reason, because they start to feel like a charity case. People in true community need to feel that they are on equal footing, that they can be a listening ear to you and be heard when they speak. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So this is the verbal connection in community, that give and take, the talk and listen. Number 2, help and be helped. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Now, I love being able to be there for someone. I want to feel useful in my relationships and have a tangible way to show that I care about somebody, and I want others to know that they can count on me when they need someone. But on the flip side, I can have a really hard time being on the receiving end of that. I have a hard time being the one who asks for help or is receiving help. Now, I know immediately that when you hear that someone has a hard time accepting help, you think that it's pride connected to feeling like they're too good to be helped. But for me, it's actually because I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of others. And I worry that if I'm the one needing help, other people won't think they can come to me for help. Maybe a root of pride in there somewhere too, but not because I think I'm too good for people to help me. But for the same reasons that I love to be the one helping, I need to let people I care about be able to help me back. I need to let those people feel useful in our friendship. I need to accept their gestures of caring for me and my family and be willing to reach out so that they know I can count on them. Otherwise, just like in communication, it creates an imbalance in the relationship that one or both people will start to resent. At the end of the day, it never actually feels good to be the only one who gives in the relationship, who's willing to help. I think it's safe to say at some point in our lives, each of us has experienced a friendship like that, where that friend always needs our help and is always looking for us to be there for them, but when we need them, they're never available. And it feels just as awful to be the one being helped all the time and never being given an opportunity to help back, or worse, have offers of help continually rejected. It can genuinely make you feel like a project instead of a friend. Now, the reason for having a balance in helping one another in community isn't to stop a power imbalance, but it is actually biblical. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." It's only with equal community support that we can keep each other sharp, or keep each other healthy spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and sometimes physically. Helping others builds them up just as much as letting them help you. Number 3, love and be loved. We recently did a series on love, so some of this may be a bit of a repeat, but we have to approach friendships and relationships and community out of love. All of these concepts tie together with love at the center. When we genuinely love those around us, it reflects in our actions and creates space for meaningful connection. When we approach others in love, we are not judging them. And believe me, you can sense a difference when someone is connecting with you in love versus judging you. When we love people, we listen to them, we help them, and we are willing to give of our time and energy. When we love those around us, we are willing to talk to them, accept help from them, and have an attitude that says we are willing to receive back from them as well. And love also feeds into our last point in friendship, which is have grace. 1 Peter 4:8 says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins," or in some cases, perceived sins. I mentioned before how pastors have seen people refusing to come back to church because they felt like their community was a lie. They felt like others should have known they were lonely, hurting, or feeling isolated and put in the effort to reach out to them, but were not willing to take ownership of the fact that they also had not considered if their friends were feeling isolated or lonely or hurting and taken the initiative to reach out first. The fact is, we don't know everything that's going on in other people's lives all the time. We see a small part of the picture of what their lives are like, and when we couple that with thinking that we should be as important to them as we are to ourselves, we can get easily offended. Instead, we need to be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Ephesians 4, verses 2 and 3. Corrine isn't here this morning, but gave me permission to talk about her. I consider Corrine a friend, and she lives in our neighborhood, which is super convenient most of the time. And recently, Corrine's dog had puppies. Her schedule was absolutely insane. Even living really close to her, I barely saw her. And text responses were slow. She would basically go to work and then come home and look after puppies and then go to sleep and then go to work and then come home and look after puppies, and that was her life. Unfortunately, hanging out with me was not a priority, and that's okay. In fact, that's exactly how it should be. If you've ever talked to Corrine, normally she is a super busy person. She's got a lot going on. And at the best of times, I know maybe a third of what she has going on in her life. And there are times where it can be a couple weeks where instead of grabbing a quick coffee here and there, we maybe only see each other briefly in the driveway or at church. Between work, kids, pets, and all the commitments that we have, sometimes there just isn't that time to connect. Living so close to each other, however, I also can see when she has other company over. So I know that she has other friends. So I could choose to take an unreasonable approach to this and develop an attitude that I must not be very important to her if she's unwilling to make time to hang out with me, or that she's chosen to hang out with somebody else when she does have time instead of calling me to pop over for a quick coffee. But honestly, that's dumb. At the end of the day, it only hurts me and those that I want to have friendships with. When we have a healthy understanding that other people's lives don't have us at the center, it can actually be quite freeing and will prevent a lot of hurt feelings. I actually don't want a friendship where I'm always expected to be available to the other person, or know that they are sitting around waiting to hear from me, because that is a lot of pressure. In the same way that I recognize that Corrine has a whole life and that her lack of texting for a few days is not an indication that she's ignoring me or doesn't like me anymore, but simply one that she is busy, she also knows that I have 4 kids, 2 dogs, a husband, as well as 2 jobs, and occasionally I also go MIA on the texting and the hanging out. If one of us feels concerned that maybe it's been too long since we checked in to see how the other person was coping with life, we just send a text or knock on the door or whatever. We don't sit there staring at our phones, stewing that the other person hasn't messaged us. That's a small example of how grace plays into relationships and community. Be the initiator if you feel like maybe there's a problem or that the communication level isn't where you want it to be. Another part of grace is the idea that we need to be BFFs, which is best friends forever, with everyone to have a proper community atmosphere. This is also an unreasonable expectation to try to live up to or to have others live up to. So you actually don't have to look around a room, even this room, and see it full of people that you connect with in a deep way. It's actually okay if some of the people in this room are ones you can spill your heart to, and some are coffee buddies, and still others are only Sunday friends. No one can actually properly maintain 40 or 50 or more deep, meaningful relationships. And according to Romans 12:18, it is only our job to try to live at peace with everyone. I know for me personally, there have been times over the years when I've met someone and known that we would be really good friends. And there's other times when I've met someone and it seems like no matter how much I like that person, a deep friendship is just not in the cards. Sometimes people just can't mesh in that way. So you actually need to have grace with yourself in this area. Give yourself permission to have different levels of friendship and remove the expectation that if you can't connect deeply with everyone, you have failed, because you haven't. And the last part about grace that I'm going to talk about today is when sometimes in relationships, people are thoughtless and careless. I know there are times when I can look back and with hindsight being a perfect 20/20, I can recognize a lot of times in relationships where I've been thoughtless and careless. And even sadder still, I probably don't recognize all of those instances. But this is another time when we have to choose to use grace in our relationships. Colossians 3:13 says, "Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." Now, I'm not suggesting that you never address when someone's actions have upset you, but if they were not acting in a malicious way designed to purposely hurt you, we need to show them grace and forgiveness, as we hope they will also show us when we fail at being loving in our relationships. The second part of that verse says, "as the Lord did for us." So I think it's only fitting that we end by talking about the most important relationship we will ever have. As imperfect as we are, Jesus has never given up on trying to have a relationship with us. All these principles of relationship with others apply to our relationship with him too. Communication back and forth, helping him, which is usually by letting him use us to help others, and reaching out to him when we need help, loving him deeply and accepting the love he has for us. The way he wants to have a relationship with us is the blueprint for a healthy community and our friendships. In fact, downstairs for the last few weeks, the kids have been learning about God as creator. I'm doing a study called The Creator in Me, and this morning they are talking about how unique God created each of them and how they were created for relationship with him. The core desire in our souls for connection is there for this purpose. Maybe you're someone who hasn't given a relationship with Jesus a try yet, or maybe you've heard about how great he is but haven't experienced it, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing about him. I want to let you know that when we say that Jesus is the ultimate friend, it's not just something that we say. For those of us that have experienced how perfect a friend we can have in Jesus, it really does show us how relationships can be with those around us. The best part is the fear of not being enough for our friends doesn't even apply with Jesus. He meets us where we are, and when we let him, he makes us enough because of the sacrifice he made for us. That sacrifice that we talk about so often of dying on the cross to cover all the wrong things that we do in our lives is the ultimate act of grace in relationship. The punishment for sin in our lives is supposed to be death, and the fact that Jesus didn't stay dead but conquered that death for eternity has solidified life for those who are willing to accept that grace and enter into true relationship with him. If you want to experience that type of relationship, we welcome you to take that step. And if you want more information about the how, we want to encourage you to reach out to us, and we can get you resources that explain what it looks like to have a deep, meaningful relationship with God. So we definitely encourage you to do that. I'm just going to close with prayer this morning. Lord, thank you that you are a friend. Thank you that your life shows us how to interact with those around us, that the Bible is so full of information on how to have healthy relationships and good community and just that deeper connection that we all want and are longing for. Lord, I thank you for everyone in this room and the relationships that they have in their lives. And I just ask that you would feed into those relationships, that they would feel your presence in the different levels of friendships that they have in their life. Lord, for those of us that this morning haven't started a relationship with you yet, maybe we've been scared to take that next step of digging into what real relationship looks like for you, or maybe we're just coming to a point where we're ready to accept your grace this morning. Lord, just pour your love on us. Show us the next steps that we need to take, no matter where we are in relationship with you. And Lord, for the people that are ready to just take that first step this morning and say, Lord, thank you for the grace that you have for me. Thank you for the sacrifice that you made for me on that cross in order that I could have relationship with you. Lord, I thank you for the work that you are doing in their hearts right now as we pray. Lord, I thank you for those people that are ready to take that step and say, yes, I need this ultimate friendship in my life and this relationship. Lord, I just ask that you would help us have as much grace for ourselves and our friends as you have for us. That as we explore relationships in our lives and the interactions that we have with those people and figure out what level of friendship we have with all of these people around us, that the permeating feeling that we would always have is love and grace with the people in our lives. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this morning. And I just thank you for our weeks going ahead. This week, the relationships we have, the new people we're going to meet. Lord, I just ask that you would help us apply these principles. Amen.